The future of work has several considerations. Our physical and digital worlds are blending. Work is no longer a place, it's an activity that we fit in with the rest of our lives. So it's about work life integration. People are living longer and obviously working longer. So a multi generational workforce is a reality worldwide. Hi, my name is Meenakshi Iyer, and I'm the founder and principal of Northstar Solutions and Services. We help leaders and small and medium enterprises design future of work pathways in this digital VUCA economy. And today I'm really excited to be here with you to have this involved conversation around the future of work and a multi-generational perspective on that. I'm really delighted to introduce my two guests today, the father-daughter duo of David and Rachael McConney. Really happy to have you both here with me today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Absolutely. And together we are going to have a three-part conversation series titled The Future of Work, a Multi-Generational Perspective. We'll start with looking at how different generations approach the job search process differently. What are their expectations and motivations around their career, and how they choose to whether balance or integrate their work and life. We're also going to look at what success looks like for them in the job search process. In the next episode, we're going to take a look at what happens once this multi-generational team has been hired, once they're all in place at the workplace. What happens then? What are their expectations from their new employer, and how organizations need to pivot in order to set everyone up for success? In the third and final episode, we'll hone in on some of the key success factors for an ecosystem that equips multi-generational teams to harness the power of diversity in thought and perspectives. So with that, I will hand it off to David and Rachael to kick us off on today's conversation.
So let's use that maybe as the the sort of kickoff, Rachael, to talk about the why. I mean, some of the things that we thought about, that we saw as we individually and collectively shared our learnings.
Yeah, no, I think that this is it's a good place to start for sure. This concept of bidirectional ageism, at its core, to me, it means that because you're from a certain generation, you can be summed up in so many words. And we have some of those words on the screen here. You know, you have your baby boomer who has the strong work ethic, or your Gen Xer who's really good at communicating, or your millennial who's all about the greater good. And while every generation does have certain characteristics that you can say, can be applied to them, I think it's super unfair to also put them in a box because of their age. And in my mind, age is sort of this, it's just a number. It's also, more about your mindset than your age. And mindset is a sliding scale. So for me, when I am in certain situations, I feel really inexperienced, like a total newbie, like I have no idea what I'm talking about. And when I'm in other situations, I feel really seasoned and comfortable. And none of that comes down to my age. It comes down to who I am and what my life is all about. So I think that we really wanted to bring this topic to light to sort of, open up a conversation that says, do you have to be placed in a box just because of your age? And do you have to be categorized this way or that way? And is that fair? And does that lead to shortcomings in the professional world?
I couldn't say it better, and I thank you for making the point that age is just a number, and it is much more about mindset, right? It's a group of experiences and what we do with those experiences. And for me, the thing that is really interesting and I think challenging in today's world is that there's an awful lot of stereotyping that goes on. And I think some of it is intentional, some of it is unintentional. You know, not that long ago, I had a colleague walk into my office and say, "Hey, old guy, how's it going?" So to them, it might have been a joke, right? Maybe it wasn't, but for me, it was like, hang on a second here. What's this all about? You know, I read an article recently that talked about in this digital world that you got to clear out the C-suite in this case in a financial services organization of all the baby boomers and replace them with Gen Xers, millennials, and others if you're actually going to be successful in a digitization strategy.
Mm.
But I think that that misses the point of the beauty of establishing very strategically an approach to building a multi-generational team.
Mm.
And you know, it's really interesting because I think that in part it's about some of the skills and passions that the younger generations bring. So I reach out to my kids from time to time for help with a particular aspect, right? But I'm also pretty firm about learning new things. And I have the experience of sort of anticipating what's around the corner that maybe they don't have. So they can rely on me for that. I can rely on them for other aspects. And that's, to me, and as Rachael and I talked about this, some of the power of really being very strategic in your approach to hiring, in your approach to onboarding teams. It's really understanding that each have their strengths, each bring those strengths to the table, and we'll talk further about, you know, the team building stuff and all of that. But you got to have the right pieces in order to end up with the right whole. And for us, that was important. You know, Rachael got hammered sometimes for experience or lack thereof. I get hammered sometimes for too much experience. And so how do you blend those things, right?
Yeah, I have a story about just to provide the opposite end of the spectrum because I have very little experience and you have a lot. But you know, the place that hired me where I'm working now, happily, they'd never hire new grads. They'd never hire new grads. And it says in the description, the job description requires 1 to 2 years of physical therapy experience, because once you're in this setting, you're a little bit more independent. And when I remember being shocked, I got my interview. And when I went in for the interview, the owner said, "Oh yeah, you're a new grad, but you changed careers. You have all this cool life experience." And so I knew in that moment that that was the only thing that got me there. Because if I had been another person who, you know, didn't change careers and start a little bit later, my resume would have been put in the no pile without bringing me in for an interview. And it was strictly my little bit more experience than your average new grad that got me there. And so it's just a really interesting conversation. And it's really fascinating to think about the fact that these super qualified, smart, personable people can be ruled out right away.
I was going to ask you about an example of you know, kind of reverse ageism, if you will, that you've experienced, and you've just answered my question. And in listening to both of you, something that came up for me was um, someone that I met, a female professional in tech, because she's above a certain age, she felt the pressure to shave off parts of her resume. You know, so she actually had to take out the first, I don't know, 5 or 6 years. She took that experience out of her resume so that it didn't really, unless somebody really sat down and did some calculations, they couldn't figure out how old she was. And so, and I think that, and I have myself experienced this where being an individual with an intersectional identity. So I'm an immigrant. I'm a brown person, and I'm female, and in technology space. that's to me is a very hard sell just from a resume. And I've often joked when I first moved here and as in my job search process, I sometimes probably only half joked that I should probably change my name to Michelle and I'd have a better luck at landing at least a phone screen. Because my thing was, if people can't pronounce my name, they are not going to call me because they wouldn't be able to say anything once they phoned me. But now that I'm hearing your different perspectives, all that's coming back to me. And here I see a point about organizational agility, and I know, David, you and I have had several conversations about this. So why do you think that a multi-generational workforce is the key to organizational agility?
I think that one of the things, and I love my quotes, and I love this one, and I thought about my dad a lot when I first saw this, because he would have a reference to the fact that experience is so important, and youth is wasted on those with he sort of made that point, and I sort of thought a little bit about this in that context. But we all see ourselves as or run the risk of seeing ourselves as more intelligent than the generation that went before, and wiser than the one that comes after it. And for me, what we miss the opportunity to do when we think very strategically about this notion of agile or nimble is that look at how much has changed since the early part of this year. Look at how much has been accomplished by companies in various spaces as a consequence of the impact of COVID-19. And so it is about being much better at planning for the short term, incorporating in that plan the ability to switch and vary direction. And I think that it's really important in that regard, therefore, to build teams that come at it from a different perspective. Mm. Because you can have a very sort of staid, tried, proven approach based on years of experience. And you can say, well, okay, I can see around the corner, but you can still think that you can avoid that corner, right? But it's more important, I think, that that you sort of have that flexibility that you get from people viewing things from a different perspective. And boy, is that huge. And we've talked about hiring people who are smarter than you, and that's one of the things that I love to do. Myself with people who are going to force me to think differently. And frankly, that's one of the things that when Rachael and I talked about this, there were occasions when, either based on her experience and me searching for how I could help her get over that hump, or just her responding to my experience and trying to give me that lift, that it caused us individually and collectively to think and approach things differently. Mm. So for me, that's the beauty of the multi-generational, the multi-perspective team, and the fact that you now are trying to work within this very sort of nimble organizational structure. Rachael, I said a lot there, but anything that you would say different?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think that the way that you put it about being able to react to the goings on of life and society and everything else is a good way to put it. And quite frankly, you can't really do that unless you have a number of different minds and a number of different people working together, because I mean, let's be honest, we all have different strengths and different weaknesses. And I don't know what the heck is wrong with one person admitting that they're not so good at this particular thing, but maybe they are at something else, and picking somebody else's brain for that information. I really do think that that is more of what's needed today. You need the combination of fresh minds and seasoned minds just to be able to stay afloat in a workforce that right now really and truly is just sort of volatile. So
Mm.
I feel the same way.
I think that I love the seasoned and fresh
Yes, I was just going to say that.
use of terms, right? To me, that kind of feels really good. But the other thing that I thought about when we talked about this, Rachel and I had a discussion about this sort of career shift, right? And the fact that she came to this initially with a pretty powerful designation, master's designation in marketing, and then switched to the healthcare space, and that ended up getting her resume taken out of the no pile and put into the yes maybe pile. I think we need to do better in terms of that categorization. And technology is a wonderful enabler, and it allows us to do many things more quickly. But one of the things that I think it hurts us in is when we pick words as in the context of certain applications and immediately eliminate people. And I think to Rachel's point, we eliminate some people who really deserve to be at least at the dance. And really all part of why we thought, you know what, let's have this conversation.
Yeah. So that's kind of actually a great segue into the specific focus for today's episode, which is on the job search process and the recruitment process, etc. So Rachel, I'd like to start with you. What's been your experience in the job search process?
Yeah, no, it's been an eye-opening one, that's for sure. But no, it worked out and it's all fine now. But it's just funny because I talked before about how there are just certain things that are kind of assigned to you based on your generation, certain labels. And I think one for millennials, and I can't for the life of me figure out why, is that we have no work ethic. And that's so, it frustrates me so much because I'm pretty type A with certain things. And having no work ethic is completely foreign to me, and I'm a millennial, so that just feels really unfair. And I think that recruiters really need to stop assuming that that's the case. We don't expect to be rewarded without putting the work in. And it's not just work ethic, it's other soft skills in general. I think millennials are being perceived as those who lack communication skills, leadership skills, all of those kinds of things. And so it's really important for us when we're putting in our applications to take every possible opportunity that we can to showcase those skills, from the email back and forth process, the resume writing process, any face-to-face interaction you get, any phone call you have. And I'm talking about millennials because that's my generation, but again, going beyond that, going to your Gen Zers. I think the other thing is, recruiters, if they have a millennial that they want to recruit, promote a really positive company culture. I can speak to my own experience, but I know that for me, it's really important to work somewhere where I'm thought of as more than just a number, where I matter as a human being, that basic human to human level versus just as an employee. That's super important to me, and I think that is to a lot of people in my age group. And then also, flexibility. It's my experience that people of a younger generation, they want flexible work situations, especially now with COVID. I mean, can you work remotely? Can you change your hours? Can you maybe have Fridays off in the summer? I don't know. Does it, just because you do, does it mean that you're going to work any less hard? I don't think it does. I think it actually means that you're going to be more committed and work harder for the company. And then my last thing that's sort of a pet peeve is, stop assuming that experience is everything. I read a post the other day about how you cannot find a perfect candidate for a job. You can find a good candidate and you can make a perfect candidate. And what matters most is who they are as a person, and do they have the willingness and the drive to learn the skills that are required for that job. So look at who they are, because that means a lot more. And those are really my big takeaways from this whole experience. So I'm interested to hear my dad's from another very different perspective.
Yeah. So So Minu, you see why I get so proud when I talk about my daughter.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think that the things that bug me, let me start there. That because you're from a certain generation, a certain age, that you've quit learning. And I think you will attest to this as someone who has worked with me for a long time. Certainly my kids will attest to this because they've heard me ad nauseum talk about it. But every day you try to learn something new, right?
Absolutely.
So for me, I will never quit learning. And there are so many from my generation who feel that way. Who, whether it's adopting technology more or just understanding their world more, they really look for opportunities to continue learning. So that's one of the pet peeves that I have. I think the other thing is that it's not just about skills, and Rachel talked about this from a millennial perspective. I'll talk about it from a boomer perspective, right? So you may not have all of the skills depending on the situation, but you can take that very good candidate with a track record that demonstrates the richness of their experience and the success of their background, and make them the perfect candidate, right? So it's mindset. It's not just experiential, but it's the right person. And you know, I think the other thing is that one of the things that's true of our generation, of my generation, is that we like to be part of a team. And so leveraging that in an environment where discourse maybe not as good as it has been traditionally, or relationships have been a little bit more contentious than maybe they might have been. For a variety of reasons, there's a lot coming at us as a society, right? As people in a society. So being able to take folks who have worked in teams and have experienced what a good team looks like and what a not so good team looks like, and who've been able to sort of bring folks together to go through that storming, norming, forming kind of process and get the best out of them based on their experiences. I think those are the things that we miss if we automatically take the boomer because of years on job, years of experience, age itself, and just say, well, that's going to go into that pile. And more than anything else, those were the things when we were talking about it. And as you can tell, we both get pretty passionate about that conversation. We thought, you know what? Let's put it out there.
Yeah, and I'm just thrilled to be a part of this conversation. And for me, listening to both of you really felt like two ends of the spectrum, because it's the same. How shall I put it? It's the same coin, if you will, and then both you are on both, two sides. Experience, lack of it is a problem. Too much of it is a problem. Work ethic, assumptions made based on just your age. And it's interesting for me, particularly, that given the amount of legislation we have and regulation we have around ageism in terms of protecting job seekers, there's still that so much that happens, even despite that, right? That's very interesting to hear those perspectives. And one thing that stood out in what both of you talked about for me was something I'd read long ago, a quote. I don't know who said this: hire for character, train for skill.
Yeah.
Right? So when you talked
I like
about
that a lot.
Yeah. I'm sorry, who said that, David?
No, Rachel.
No, I said I like that a lot. I think that's a great quote. I 100% believe that. I really don't understand having numbers of years of particular experience when someone is teachable. I mean, that's what matters. Are you teachable?
Right, right.
Mm.
Absolutely.
Mm.
So far, I heard you talk about your own experiences. So, I'm sure there's a lot of job seekers amongst our viewers as well. So there's quite a few great tips that you've shared in terms of your outlook in the job search process and some of the opportunities and challenges that you've come across. Taking that a little bit further along, what I wanted to understand was, do you have any tips to share for leaders and for recruiters that are on the other side of the table?
Sounds like a perfect setup, Minu. Yeah, well, we're going to try to. And as you share this slide, I guess I will give away that the two folks in the picture here represent two of my favorite actors. The movie was one of my favorites.
I remember this one. Yeah.
And I meant, I said at the beginning, the teacher becoming the student and vice versa. And so that's what this reminds me of. And this is for me, as I like to refer to it, the money slide, right? The stuff that you can hopefully take away and reflect on as you reflect on your own journey. So Rachel, why don't you share some of your thoughts around this?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, this picture actually reminds me of like some of the times when we've been on FaceTime, and I'm like, I've either taught you how to put a link in your email signature, or you've given me like interview tips and strategies. So I feel like this goes, for sure both ways in terms of who's teaching who. And that's what it reminds me of. But I think all in all, the message that we're trying to get across here is not like hire all boomers, hire all millennials. Clearly, it's hire from both ends of the spectrum and everywhere in between.
Mm-hmm.
Because you would be doing yourself and your company a disservice if you did not do that. It comes down to building a complementary team structure where you have people who every single one of them brings something different to the table. And in order for that to happen, it does mean that they need to be in different stages of their career from different age groups. So I really do think that that's important. And part of the way that you accomplish that is by looking beyond the resume and beyond the words that are on the piece of paper and taking the time for your face-to-face interactions, which very rarely happens these days. And so I would say that that would be the one big push that I would make. What do you think?
Yeah, I would echo all that you've said, Rachel. I think for me, it's the concept from a leadership perspective of being very purposeful and really strategic in terms of your decision around the type of people that you're going to hire. There's some thinking about the skill set, right? That obviously has to be sort of a baseline, but more important than that is how do you address the team structure? What are the value systems of the organization, and how do particular people fill out and support those value systems? And leveraging different perspectives. I mean, we've talked about this during the course of this, and hopefully it's come across strongly. We view the world through different lenses, but bringing that all together is pretty cool and pretty powerful. Take the time for face-to-face interactions. I know it's hard. I look at some of the applications that are out there, and you see several hundred applicants. Figure out a process that allows you to be more strategic in how you're going to get in front of people more regularly, more consistently, with the right. And then how do you engage with them, and engage with them at the beginning of the process, through the process, and at the end of the process. There's so much out there about people feeling that they don't know, they don't hear, the new term, being ghosted. And I think there's so much more that we can do in that regard. So this is our money slide. This is our takeaway slide. And Rachel, I'm so happy that you've hit your landing spot. I'm going to hit mine soon. And Minu, aka Meenakshi, thank you for facilitating this, for helping us have the conversation. And for all of those who are watching this via the YouTube or whatever video source, thank you for listening in, and hope that you find this of value.
Agreed. Thank you. I back that up.
Thank you both. It's been a pleasure having you over at North Star Solutions and Services, and it was really interesting for me to be a sort of a live fly on the wall in this conversation. It brought out that, like I said earlier, two ends of the spectrum. It brought that out, and I don't think I've had this opportunity to have this kind of a conversation before with different generations at the same table. I did, and maybe you can add some more comments later in the video once the video is published on YouTube. Some of the things that you talked about, your expectations of recruiters and the recruiters that are watching, I'm really interested to hear their feedback and some of their questions and thoughts on that. And I definitely think that the point you made about, David, that you made about candidates receiving feedback and the current experience of feeling ghosted, that I'm interested to hear feedback on that and more thoughts and questions on that from other candidates as well. And the one other thing I wanted to point out here was, Rachael, for me, it was interesting to hear you say and highlight the importance of face-to-face interactions. So I guess that's my bias playing in, where I'm expecting someone from your generation to not have that expectation. So I became aware of that while hearing you say that. So that's really interesting. So you can see how all of these, our own unknown biases, play out as well in this process. So again, once again, thank you both very much, and I really look forward to the next 2 episodes of this 3-part conversation series on the future of work, a multi-generational perspective. And like we said earlier at the start of this conversation, in our next episode, we are going to look at what happens once everybody's been hired. Then what happens, and what are the expectations from the different generations? What do companies, what are they doing, and what do they need to do in order to ensure that they're able to set everyone up for success? So I think that's an interesting topic in and of itself. So I'm really excited to hear your thoughts on that in the next episode that'll come out on 1st of October. So once again, thank you everyone that's watching, and thank you both, Rachael and David. So we will, this is the first episode, as you all know, and then for the next 3 months, we'll have an episode around the 1st of the month, and then we'll have a live fireside chat with both David and Rachael sometime around the middle of November, with all the questions and comments that we will have received by then. And connect with all of us on LinkedIn. And also you can please follow North Star Solutions and Services on LinkedIn, Twitter, and subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you can get updates as and when these videos are uploaded. And our website is northstar@work.com. So again, thank you all very much, and see you guys soon.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Take care.